Good evening, professionals. In our 7th Corporate Law webinar series, we are discussing about the provisions on SEBI LODR, including all the recent amendments, thanks to Uday Kotak Committee, pursuant to various recommendations made by them during their report submitted on October 5th of 2017, and subsequent to which SEBI, in its board meeting held during the month of March 2018, considered several recommendations made by Uday Kotak Committee, and thereafter on May 9th, 2018, we are seeing various provisions, including the amendments made, incorporating the provisions and the recommendations made by Uday Kotak Committee. And hence, several amendments, if we notice in the LODR provisions, are effective 1st April 2019. Certain amendments are made effective May 2018 pursuant to IBC coming into force. And on 29 July 2019, there were several amendments made to LODR pursuant to SR voting rights, superior voting rights given. So these are the significant amendments made to LODR subsequent to its notification, which was made on 2nd September 2015. We have had 2 webinars subsequent to the 7th series on SEBI LODR. In the first webinar, we discussed about the principles governing the disclosures and obligations of SEBI LODR. That is, from chapter 1 to chapter 3, we discussed in detail during the first webinar of the series. In the second webinar, we started with this particular chapter 4, which deals with obligation on listing of specified securities, where we covered part 1 dealing with regulation 15 to regulation 22, where 21, because we are going to discuss from vigil mechanism today in part 2. In part 1, we discussed in length about the obligations of listed entities, obligation of compliance officer in terms of share transfer agent, and in terms of various preservation document policies, and the procedural requirements as enshrined in Schedule 1 with regard to dividend payment or debenture interest payment. We are going to continue the obligation on listing of specified securities, part 2 today, continuing with the same series and trying to understand from regulation 22 about vigil mechanism, related party transaction 23, and then about various corporate governance requirements. While in the previous webinar, we discussed about the composition of the board in regulation 17 and 18 to 21 dealing with the roles and responsibilities of various statutory committees of the board: audit committee, nomination and remuneration committee, stakeholders relationship committee, and risk management committee. Today in part 2, we are going to continue this obligation on listing of specified securities with vigil mechanism, related party transactions, and several other provisions with regard to the corporate governance requirements again, and obligation of independent directors, directors including independent directors, employees including senior management, KMPs, and when prior intimation is necessitated to be made to stock exchange, what are the various timelines prescribed. Sincere thanks to Aishwarya for this detailed presentation. These are various legends used in today's presentation, where if you see ADR, GDR, FCCBs, QIPs, various issue related matters are dealt with under regulation 29, while prior intimation is required when you are going to consider these items of issuance for fundraising in your board meeting. IBC is again, as we discussed in the beginning of this session, that IBC is effective May 2018. You have several amendments and insertions in the LODR consequent to IBC coming into effect. All other abbreviations we are well aware of. Vigil mechanism. So what is vigil mechanism, friends? You blow the whistle when something is not in order in the company. You have similar provision in section 177, subsection 9 and 10 of Companies Act, read with companies rules. The same provision is adopted in LODR, friends. So it is the same provision in regulation 22, where it specifies that you shall formulate a vigil mechanism. It is applicable for whom? For directors, employees. And why is it mandated? Because to report all the genuine concerns. Of course, they will be provided necessary safeguard when they are going to blow the whistle. When they are going to report any concern, adequate protection will be given to those complainants. Is the assurance given by the regulation, and it provides direct access to these people, the complainants, to make their complaint submitted or referral submitted to the recipient, and hence they say direct access is provided to the chairperson of the audit committee. There will be a separate mail ID which will be created by the companies, or if there is already an existing ID to the chairperson of the audit committee, it will be routed to this. And how this particular information will be disseminated is in your website. While you upload this whistleblower policy, you will say to which email ID this particular communication shall take place. Regulation 23, very important provision, friends, and every time when you read this provision, it will look fresh and you will have so many doubts when you have practical application to it. So let's try to understand it together. RPT policy shall be formulated. We all are aware that there are several policies which are mandated by SEBI LODR. Preservation policy in your regulation 9. Your 22 mandates your whistleblower policy. 23 talks about your RPT policy. And thereafter, we are going to discuss about materiality policy. And you have the criteria determined for the appointing the directors and giving remuneration to directors. So all these policies are in place. But RPT, there are some additional stipulations. If you read this policy, it says that it shall be reviewed at least once in every 3 years, which is not prescribed for any other policy. But ideally, it is better that companies review all these policies either when there is a regulatory amendment. Say, for example, you have a LODR amendment. So you review the policies in the light of these amendments to see if there is any amendment warranted for these policies, or option B, when every annual year you are going to consider all your accounts and other disclosures. At that meeting, it is better that you review these policies to see if there is any change required because of the business requirement or because of regulatory notifications. So this policy materiality on RPT, this policy shall be formulated where you have to specify the clear threshold limits on what you consider to be dealing with related party transaction, and it shall be reviewed at least once in every 3 years. What is material, friends? When there is a transaction and it exceeds 10% of the annual consolidated turnover. Consolidated turnover means all your subsidiaries, associates, JV entities, all consolidated in your financials when it exceeds 10% of the turnover as per the last audited accounts. Then it necessitates this particular transaction to be considered as material. And very important, friends, you have to compute this not only individually, but you have to sum up all the transactions during the year to consider whether the threshold is exceeded or not. So there is this particular corporate governance policy. I just wanted to show you this particular related party transaction policy of Infosys, but I'm unable to open this hyperlink, but the policy clearly draws reference to all the necessary LODR specifications, including your section 188 of Companies Act, read with rule 6A, which are the matters where omnibus approval will be provided by the audit committee, and what are the aspects to be considered by the audit committee while granting approval for this particular omnibus approval, and what is the criteria for getting this approval of related party transactions and the maximum threshold limit. All these are discussed in detail in the RPT policy, more in conformity with the provisions in your Companies Act and LODR regulation. What is a related party? Related party, according to 1ZB, is a related party as per section 2 subsection 76 of the Companies Act or under applicable accounting standards. If you see, in Jan 2017 there was one FAQ raised by SEBI where there were several doubts raised by all the listed entities whether we have to go by related party definition under Companies Act or accounting standard. Your applicable accounting standard, we all are well aware that it will be your Ind AS 24, or in a phased manner, if Ind AS is not applicable to your company, then you will go by IGAAP, which is AS 18. So in which case, the FAQ clearly clarifies, basis the response given by SEBI, that when the related party is as per the provisions of Companies Act, and if that is going to be in addition in as prescribed in accounting standards, then you have to go by both, because on a conservative basis you have to go apply the transaction on both Companies Act and Indian accounting standards or Ind AS perspective is what it clarifies. You may also like to see it is available in the public domain. And any person or entity belonging to promoter or promoter group of the listed entity and holding 20% of the shareholding in the listed entity are also included pursuant to SEBI LODR amendment, making the definition pretty wide. We all are again aware, section 2 subsection 76 clearly draws reference to related party as a related party in relation to a company means a director or relative, KMP or relative, firm in which such director is a partner, director or relative is a partner, or private company in which such particular director, manager or relative is a member or director, or a public company in which such director, manager or relative is a director, and along with those relatives, the definition says and cumulative condition, and holds along with its relatives more than 2% of the paid up share capital, or a body corporate which is accustomed to act in accordance with the directions or instructions given by this director, manager or relative, or any person on whose direction or advice, it is the other way around, on whose advice or instructions this director, manager or relative is accustomed to act. It also includes your holding subsidiary or investing company or venturer, where such investment makes it an associate company, very importantly, holding subsidiary or associate company. And your holding company's director, excluding your independent director, of course, and KMPs of your holding company. So this is the broad definition of your related party according to Companies Act. And Ind AS or your AS 18, again there is a big list of what constitutes related party, your common control, establishing significant influence, holding, subsidiary, associate company. So all these definitions, including your enterprise, which is managed by your KMP, key management personnel. So all these are considered for the purpose of your accounting standards. Of course, here there is an exception. The units issued by mutual funds, this definition shall not be applicable. Why, friends? Because it is governed by a specific regulation under SEBI Mutual Fund Regulations 96. Related party transaction means 21ZC says transfer of resources, services or obligation between listed entity and related party. The last line is significant where it says regardless of whether a price is charged. That makes it very wide, because whether the price is charged or not is immaterial, and again it includes both single or group of transactions together. This definition is similar to what is as provided in your accounting standards. Relative again has definition as provided in your 2 subsection 77 of your Companies Act. Again this definition will not be applicable to your mutual funds issued. Then 23(1)(a) talks about transactions involving payments made to a related party when it comes to brand or royalty usage. And here the materiality threshold is more than 5%. Friends, please remember it was enhanced from 2% to 5% effective 27 June 2019. Of course, all RPTs will require prior approval of your audit committee, and while granting omnibus approval, audit committee will take into consideration various factors such as your criteria and whether it is applicable and it is repetitive in nature, because you are having repetitive transactions and hence it is worth going for omnibus approval. If it is going to be one time in nature, why will you go for omnibus approval? You might as well will go for specific approval every time. So that is the reason audit committee will consider whether it is repetitive in nature, and very importantly it will ascertain whether it is in the interest of the listed entity. It is almost the same as provided in your Rule 6A and your section 188 read with Rule 15 of your Companies Act read with rules, friends. These provisions are also quite similar to what is there in your Act read with rules, where omnibus approval shall specify the details regarding the name of the related party, the nature of the transaction, and the duration of the transaction, and very importantly, the valuation and such other conditions which will be necessary for the audit committee to grant this omnibus approval. And review of omnibus approval shall happen on a quarterly basis. You are taking an approval for 1 year because the validity is maximum for a period of 1 year. Generally, what happens in the month of April or May, in the first meeting of every financial year, the listed entities go for this omnibus approval, providing all the necessary details as set out in Regulation 23, read with your 188 and relevant rules. What happens if you're taking an approval for, say, 15 lakhs for your ICD, Central Corporate Loans, okay? And it is repetitive in nature because you're granting such loans for your subsidiaries or associate companies, and it is in the interest of listed entity, and you're going to prove all those necessary matters as provided in your Act and your LODR. But what happens is you're exceeding this ICD by say 16 or 17 lakhs in the second quarter. Then you may have to go for review of omnibus approval at least on a quarterly basis. So you will specify this was the actual approved vis-a-vis this is what you have ideally utilized and what is the subsequent approval you are going to place to your audit committee shall be specified with all the specific details as mandated in the regulation. All material related party transactions where it requires approval of shareholders, it is very important that the related party is not approving such resolution. It is previously it was mentioned as be abstained from voting. They have substituted with the language they shall not vote in such resolutions. It's very important provision, friends. Please understand the difference. Here the material related party transactions, they are not allowing the party to approve the resolution regardless of whether that particular entity is a related party to the transaction or not. Whereas in Companies Act, it clearly says that in a contract or arrangement, if you are a related party, then you shall not approve such resolution, which makes it a stricter provision when it comes to LODR, because whether you are connected to the contract or arrangement, it is immaterial. If it is a material related party, you better don't approve such resolution being a related party to the company. There is an exception, friends, where if a resolution plan is approved under section 31 of IBC, subject to the event being disclosed to your stock exchange within 1 day of this resolution plan being approved. When you read regulation of IBC, that is section 31, it clearly says that approval of the resolution plan, when it is done by the adjudicating authority, being your tribunal, and when it is approved by the COC, which is your committee of creditors, then it shall necessarily be binding on various stakeholders, be it your investors, be it your corporate debtors, creditors, employees, or all directors of all concerned. So there, such resolution plan is approved, then this material RPT will not apply to that particular resolution plan which is approved. And also regulation 234 are not applicable in the case of transaction between two government companies. It is 234 which talks about your material RPT, prior approval of our audit committee, or your previous this granting of omnibus approval, all those requisite matters. So transaction also entered into between a holding and subsidiary, provided this subsidiary numbers are considered for your consolidation purpose. Of course, government company has reference to your section 2 subsection 45 of Companies Act, which is your central government, state government, more than 51% stake held by the central government or partly by central and state government, including a subsidiary of this government company. This regulation is applicable to all prospective transactions, which means you have to seek prior approval before the transaction is entered into, and all entities falling under the definition of related party shall not vote with regard to the relevant transaction, irrespective of whether they are related party or not. So please understand the difference between 4 and 7. 4 is for material RPT. This is for RPT simpliciter. And all existing material related party contracts or arrangements entered prior to this date of the regulation, which is on 2nd September when it was notified, when existing material related party transactions were not approved by your shareholders, then in the first general meeting held after this notification, you shall take their approval. Regulation 9 is a recently introduced regulation where it is mandated that the consolidated related party transactions list on a half-yearly basis effective 31st March 2019. For that, from that half year ended, you shall submit to the stock exchange in the format which is quite similar to your annual results submitted to the stock exchange. Regulation 24, corporate governance requirement with respect to subsidiaries. Very important, friends. At least one independent director on the board of listed entity. He shall be a director on the board of unlisted material subsidiary. Let me give you an example. Mahindra is a listed entity, and you have this Mahindra AMC, and it is calculated basis the material subsidiary computation as a material unlisted subsidiary. Then one Anand Mahindra or some director. Here it talks about independent director, so it should be not Anand Mahindra because he is not an independent director. So one independent director from Mahindra should be on the board of your Mahindra AMC. Is what Regulation 24 makes it mandatory. And material subsidiary, again the threshold specifies the subsidiary whose income or net worth exceeds 20% of your consolidated income or net worth in the immediately preceding accounting year. Then 24 sub-regulation 2(3) talks about your minutes. So in Mahindra board meeting, they have to consider this Mahindra Financial Services, Mahindra AMC, all the other subsidiaries financials or the minutes also to be placed in their particular board meeting. So along with the minutes of that particular listed entity which is going to be considered and taken on record, they should also take on record the minutes of the unlisted subsidiaries. And also the audit committee of the listed entity shall review the financials, more importantly the investments made by the unlisted subsidiary. Friends, please understand the difference between 24(1), which talks about material unlisted subsidiary, and 24(2), 3 and 4, where it talks about only unlisted subsidiary. Again, there is a FAQ in SEBI portal released during Jan 2017, where several listed entities have raised this query, whether unlisted material subsidiary is what is prescribed in 24(1), whether the same will hold good for other 2-3 items, that is sub-regulation 2, 3 and 4, where the minutes of unlisted subsidiaries shall be provided financial statements to be reviewed. Which means they are asking, is there a difference between material unlisted subsidiary and unlisted subsidiary? SEBI has clarified by opining that yes, when 24(1) talks about material unlisted subsidiary, that requirement shall be met with only by material unlisted subsidiaries. Which means independent director placement in your material unlisted subsidiary shall be complied with only when it is material and the threshold is breached. But for other matters like your audit committee reviewing your financials of unlisted and all, irrespective of whether it is a material subsidiary or not, you may have to review their investments, you may have to record their minutes, and statement of all significant transactions entered by these subsidiaries, unlisted subsidiaries, shall be periodically reviewed by the management of your main entity. So significant transaction, again the threshold is exceeding 10% of your total revenue or expenditure or assets or liabilities, as the case may be. Again, it is effective the immediate preceding accounting year. Listed entity shall not dispose of its shares in the material subsidiary, resulting in reduction of the shareholding to less than 50% of the control which is exercised in that subsidiary without passing a special resolution in a general meeting. So, when I am holding more than 51% and there is a dip of exceeding 10%, which necessitates this particular reduction of more than 50% or because it will go to 40% of my stake in that particular subsidiary company, thus leading to passing a special resolution in a general meeting. Of course, there is an exception. If such divestment is pursuant to a scheme or arrangement, then there is an exception, provided you submit this particular approval of this particular event within 1 day of this resolution plan being approved under IBC, this stock exchange, or within one day you are submitting this particular scheme which is approved by the court or tribunal, as the case may be. Prior approval of shareholders by passing a special resolution will be required when there is a sale or disposal or leasing of assets which leads to more than 20% of the material subsidiary on an aggregate basis during the preceding financial year, during a particular year. If the sale is made under a scheme, again there is an exception, pursuant to a scheme or arrangement which is approved by the court or tribunal, or when it is a resolution plan which is approved under section 31 of IBC, provided you disseminate that information to the recognized stock exchange within 1 day of this resolution plan being approved. Regulation 24A mandates secretarial audit. This is again an insertion pursuant to Uday Kotak Committee's recommendation, where it is mandatory for all listed entities to conduct this particular secretarial audit, not only for the entity but also for its material unlisted subsidiary. Again, your material unlisted subsidiary, you will go by Regulation 24 threshold, and this secretarial audit shall be done by a PCS. SEBI, by its circular on 8th Feb 2019, clarified that in order to avoid duplication, the companies already they are doing this secretarial audit, listed entities pursuant to your section 204 read with your rule 9 of companies chapter 13 companies management, appointment and remuneration of managerial personnel, and hence the same MR3 report could be appended to your annual report. Point number 1. Point number 2, they say the secretarial compliance report shall be provided by the PCS, affirming more importantly about the listed entities compliances with regard to your SEBI Act, whether the company has complied with all the regulations, including your LODR, ICDR, pre-listing requirements, takeover regulations, your PIT regulation, insider trading regulation, if there was any buyback regulation, if there are any ESOPs issued by the company, your share-based employee benefits regulations, and if there are any debentures, then your ILDS regulation, issue and listing of debt securities regulation, and if there are any non-convertible preference shares, then your issue and listing of your non-convertible or redeemable preference shares regulation. So all these regulations, whether the company was sufficiently complying with the requirements, basis the documents which they have filed with stock exchange and basis the records which are maintained by the company. If there are any deviations, the same shall also be necessarily reported in their particular secretarial compliance report. And further to that, if there are any notices issued by any such regulators, then the same shall also be provided, because secretarial audit report covers in detail about various aspects of the company, including Companies Act. But this secretarial compliance report is more particular to the listed entities in compliance with the SEBI regulations. And the form is as specified with effect from the year ended 31st March 2019. Obligation with respect to independent directors. Here, no person shall be appointed or continue as an alternate director for an independent director of a listed entity. This is effective 1st October 2018, friends. Prior to this, 25(1) read as a person shall not serve as an independent director in more than 7 entities, provided if he is already serving as a whole-time director, he shall not serve as an independent director in more than 3 entities. Friends, don't think that this is omitted or dropped. This provision is moved to your regulation 17A, where the maximum in the composition of board of directors, the maximum number where they can comprise as independent directors is specifically provided, and along with WTD, they have also included managing director. And the maximum tenure of independent director is in accordance with your Companies Act, where we all know that 149 clearly says that it shall be for a period of 5 years, and for subsequent term, this is called the term, and subsequent term you may have to appoint, you may do so, provided you pass the necessary resolution and make the specific disclosure in the board's report, and there are only 2 terms allowed, and after which there will be a cooling off period of 3 years, which we all are well aware of. So here they are drawing reference to your Companies Act provision. And a separate meeting of independent directors shall be held at least once in a year. This is again drawing reference to your Schedule 4 of the Companies Act, where clause 7 clearly says that separate meeting shall be held, and without the presence of your very important senior management or non-independent directors in that particular meeting. And this is again drawing reference from your schedule 4 only, where in this separate meeting, the agenda will be to review the performance of your non-independent directors, to review the performance of your board, review the performance of the chairperson also. See, the independent director has such a pivotal role that he has the right to review the role of even the chairperson of the listed entity. And they will also see whether the flow of information which is being given to them during the board meetings are adequate, and the quality timeline, whether necessary timeline, if it is 7 days in advance of the board meeting as per the standards, whether the company is providing the agenda papers in advance for them to spend adequate time in reviewing and contributing effectively in the board meeting. So all these aspects will be discussed in detail in the separate meeting of independent directors. Independent director shall be held liable only in respect of such acts of omission or commission by the listed entity which had occurred with his knowledge, with his consent or connivance, or which he had not acted diligently. This is again lifted from your 149 subsection 12 of Companies Act. And vacancy is again quite similar to your 149 read with rule, friends, where an ID who is resigning, then the vacancy shall be filled in the two events, whichever is later. One is immediately in the next board meeting or within 3 months from the date of such vacancy. There is an exception, friends. If the listed entity fulfills the requirement with regard to IDs, say for example, basis my composition of the board, I need to have only 4 independent directors. I had 5 independent directors and this independent director had resigned. No worries, because I'm still complying with the requirement of 4 minimum threshold, and hence without filling the vacancy, if I'm going to meet the minimum criterion, it is fine. I need not go in a hurried manner to fill this particular vacancy. And familiarization program of IDs is also quite important for the listed entity, where the industry's nature they shall understand, the roles, responsibilities of independent directors they should be knowing, and business model of the listed entity, so that they can have effective participation in the board meeting. This is additional requirement with regard to D&O policy, friends. Top 500 listed entities, which is not there in your Companies Act, where the top 500 listed entities by market cap as on 31st March shall undertake the D&O policy for all their IDs. Why do you have D&O policy, friends? This is to protect the directors and officers, to indemnify them against any loss which they may face because of being in the capacity of or holding the office of directors. And the annual declaration is quite similar to your Companies Act provision, where they have to confirm their criteria of independence. Here it is regulation 16(1)(b), there it is 149 subsection 6 qualification criteria. They have to say that they are complying with that requirement in 149 subsection 7. Otherwise, the contents are the same. You have to submit it at the first meeting of the board in which they participated as a director, and subsequently at the first meeting in every financial year, which means in April, if you have a meeting, you have to place it in the first meeting of that financial year. And if there is any change in the circumstance which affects their independence, there also they may have to submit their declaration. 26 talks about the maximum number where they can be holding the position as chairmanship or membership, where a director shall not be a member in more than 10 committees or act as a chairperson of not more than 5 committees across all listed entities in which he is a director, and the same shall be determined to include public listed companies, public limited companies, whether listed or not. Here again there is a question raised in the FAQ released by SEBI, whether only listed entities are computed or even public limited companies are included for the purpose of 10 and 5. The answer is yes. Public limited companies is what SEBI has opined, but it excludes private companies, Section 8 companies, foreign companies and any other company. For this reckoning the limit of committees, only statutory committees like your SRC and audit committee are considered, and not your NRC or RMC. Every director shall of course inform the listed entity about his committees. Otherwise, it will be difficult for them to see whether he is breaching the threshold or not. And they shall, all the members of the board shall affirm compliance with regard to code of conduct of the board and senior management. We have discussed about this particular declaration on code of conduct in our previous webinar as well. A non-executive director shall disclose their shareholding while there is a proposal regarding their appointment in the general meeting, and senior management shall also make necessary disclosure to the board relating to their pecuniary interest in any transaction where they have interest, and the conflict of, so that the necessary conflict of interest in the listed entity shall be recorded, where the conflict of interest again is defined as relating to dealing in the shares of the listed entity or their commercial dealings with the relevant bodies which have shareholding of management and their relatives. Effective 4th January 2017, this is introduced where prior approval from the board and public shareholders by ordinary resolution is required. Friends, please remember the importance of the word public shareholders, which means your promoter shareholders should be excluded for the purpose of considering this approval now. Any employee, if he is including the promoter, KMP, or the directors, when they enter into any arrangement, either by himself or with any other person, on behalf of any other person, when he is going to act as a representative with a shareholder or any third party regarding compensation or profit sharing in relation to any dealings with the securities, this transaction shall certainly have approval of board and also the public shareholders by way of ordinary resolution. What if there is already an agreement effective date, which is 4th January 2017? Then the necessary approval shall certainly be taken both from the board and shareholders subsequent to this effective date, that is 4th January 2017. And if there is any agreement which has expired during the preceding 3 years from the effective date, which is 4th January, then it shall be disclosed to the stock exchange for all public dissemination. And all interested persons will be involved in this particular transaction, and who is interested person for this purpose will mean any person holding rights in the listed entity and who is in any manner directly or indirectly interested in any agreement or proposed agreement to be entered into by such person or employee or KMP or director or promoter with any other shareholder with respect to such profit sharing arrangement. More importantly, dealing with the securities. Corporate governance report shall be provided on a quarterly basis by all the listed entities. There is a specified format. You shall also provide your material related party disclosures here. Due to COVID, there is an extension. Generally, the timeline is within 15 days from the close of the quarter. Hence, 31st March, the due date is 15th April, but there is an extension due to COVID up to 15th May. And Schedule 2 talks about voluntary disclosures in your corporate governance, which is non-executive chairman, he may maintain a chairperson's office in the listed entity, and whatever is the expenditure incurred for maintenance of this office, the listed entity may reimburse. And every half year, listed entity may disseminate information which is voluntarily to all the shareholders about the market, about how their business is growing, and about the volatility, and whatever financial performance they want to disclose to the shareholders, they may do so, but it is optional. And internal auditor again may report directly to the audit committee, which is voluntary, and listed entity may move towards a regime of financial statements with unmodified audit opinion. And here, effective 1st April 2020, there is this omission of separate person to the post of chairperson and managing director. Regulation 28 talks about obtaining in principle approval of recognized stock exchanges. Listed entity, before they issue any securities, they shall certainly obtain in principle approval from the stock exchange having nationwide terminal, or where they are listed on a stock exchange which is not a main board, or where they are listed in a stock exchange without having nationwide terminal, they shall certainly obtain in principle approval from the relevant stock exchanges concerned. Prior intimation, very important provision, friends. Listed entity, whenever there is a board meeting, you have to always see whether you are falling within the specific items as provided in regulation 29 to see within what time you may have to intimate the stock exchange. Say for example, I am going to have this particular board meeting for the purpose of issuing for a preferential issue, or for the purpose of QIP, which is your qualified institutions placement, or for the purpose of raising it through a debt security by way of private placement. If the board meeting is going to be held on 30th June, then I am bound to inform stock exchange on or before 25th June, that is 2 working days before this particular event is happening. So you may have to consider 25 because 25, 26, assuming 27, 28 to be holiday, 20, 29 or 30th, if that is the event date, at least 2 working days before you may have to intimate the stock exchange. And if it is going to be financial results, at least 5 days before you consider the financial results, you may have to intimate the stock exchange. Likewise, when you are going to discuss about the proposal for buyback, or you're going for voluntary delisting, or for declaration of dividend, any corporate action which you are going to do, including your bonus shares issuance, you may have to necessarily intimate, give prior intimation to stock exchange that you are in this board meeting, you are going to consider these matters. There is an omission here, effective 1st October 2018. It is imperative to note that when you are going to have this agenda item for declaration of this particular bonus, then this prior intimation timeline will apply. If it is not forming part of your agenda, then prior intimation is not relevant or not required to be given to the stock exchange. Friends, please ask me for any doubts or clarification on the subject, because we are going to complete this session, this slide. The intimation shall be given at least 2 working days in advance, excluding the date of intimation and the date of meeting of the board. That's why I said that particular for 30th will be ignored, and 25th you are going to intimate to stock exchange, 25th will be ignored. Then 26, 27, considering those 2 days to be the working days, and 28, 29 if they are holidays, the 2 working, it will be considered as well compliant with the provision only when you are going to give it on 24th, which is the latest possible date for compliance. And prior intimation with regard to clause A, which is your financial results to be considered by the board meeting, then at least 5 days before you may have to intimate the stock exchange. And it is 11 days when it is going to be alteration in the nature of your securities, where there is alteration of share capital or alteration in the rights or privileges. And you're, for example, you are going to give superior voting rights, or you're going to vary the class in the class of rights, like additional class A, class B equity shares are going to be given to your PE investors or venture capital fund investors, in which case there is alteration in the right, or more privileges attached to couple of voting shareholders, additional voting power is granted, in which case the timeline is not 2 or 5, it is 11. Please remember that. And if there is going to be any alteration in the interest date, that is, you are paying debenture to your holders, and there is already there will be a record date and the payment of interest date in your information memorandum. If you are going to change that particular date of redemption of debentures or date of repayment of your interest, in which case at least 11 days before this particular change in your information memorandum or in the term sheet, you may have to certainly intimate the stock exchange. Why such prior intimation, friends? So that your shareholders are well aware of this particular decision which is going to happen in a board meeting, and they are not deprived of any information which is going to happen all of a sudden in a board meeting, so that they can plan well for buying additional securities or selling their additional securities as the case may be. So there will be market watchers basically. So today, part 2 of obligation of listed securities, listed entities having specified securities, we discussed up from regulation 22 to regulation 29, dealing with vigil mechanism, related party transactions, corporate governance requirements, obligation of directors including IDs, obligation of employees including your KMPs, senior management, directors and promoters, and very importantly, the prior intimation when it has to be made to your stock exchange. So with this, we are concluding part 2 of our session of specified securities, friends, where specified securities, we all are aware, includes your equity shares and CCPS and CCDs. We will continue in part 3 with the same chapter 4, where we have several other important obligations of listed entities dealing with specified securities. Thank you very much, friends. Please take care, stay safe, stay positive.